All right, let's unravel the world in, let's say, 10 minutes. Okay, the whole problem with the world is that it's based on the future, right? All suffering is based on future events, living in the past, living in the future, and we're supposed to be momentary beings living in the present. Present. If we live in the present, there is no suffering. You don't need to follow any one religion to know that. That's every religion, Buddhism, whatever, speaks to that. And momentary living prioritizes enjoyment, community, family, nature. And the system we live under is built around the future. So you're working towards retirement. You're working towards a partner, um, education, a house. That's all future stuff. And you want to, so take marriage for instance. It's something something we look for in the future because society has said that it's a natural step in your life, but that's just something you were told. Yeah, of course, men and women are supposed to be. That's We know that it's just the institution and the progression of things that is not necessarily natural because it's like these things are set up to make you think like I just think you should get away from these things that are trying to tell you you need to get an actual like institutionalized marriage where it's not that marriage is wrong, it's that everything that's behind the idea of marriage. So future marriage is based on future, it's based on family, it's based on the monetary system, it's based on having enough money to support your family, and that's actually, there's nothing necessarily wrong with providing for your family, providing for yourself, providing for people, but it's more so um, it just comes, first of all, marriage comes with a lot of stress. It's forced gender roles often. You have to meet obligations. Not only do you have to go to work under a system that pushed you to go and work in a certain job under a certain education system, so the education system probably needs to be considered as well because it's not necessarily looking at momentary living. Although a lot of the things, I'm not saying it's not good to learn math, science, literature. That's fine, and all those things are actually worthy pursuits. But the priorities should be momentary living. So like understanding emotional, holistic living, understanding how to move away from the world in some sense because it's based on future planning, external validation. Again, this is all conditioned. Not saying any of this is necessarily wrong, but it is the root of suffering. Future planning is the root of all suffering. So, um, again, marriage isn't necessarily wrong. It's just built on the wrong things. So it should be built on love, whatever, freedom, and living your best life, which is in the moment. When things are built around the future and supply, demand, what can you do for me? What are you providing? Again, providing is a normal thing about life. We need to make that very clear that providing is actually a normal thing. People want to provide. They want to serve their families, their people, the community. That's a normal thing. It's just that we need to be, if it was based on a community system, then it would make sense, because when it's based on serving the community, serving family, living healthy lifestyles, living enjoyable lifestyles in nature, then you don't get you don't get all that stress and the external validation, the need to provide, and relationships are built on the right things. And you inherently, when things are built around the right moment, and that doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with anything other than just enjoying the moment and energy and nature and people. And so there's just it's always a pressure thing, right? It's always um, it's always a pressure in the system that we live in to um, attain the next thing, right? Go make enough money to get a house now, and not saying shelter is a bad thing. You want to live in houses. I'm saying that that's actually a form of isolation in itself. Wanting to move into a house with just your small little family. Not saying that's overly wrong, but again, that's a future attainment goal where, again, you're forming isolation, and it seems to be that future living and isolation are strong forms of suffering, and the sustainability of human life on Earth relies on getting back to community, healthy living, and focusing on living in the moment, because that's where you end all suffering. Unfortunately, the modern world is built around selling the American dream has been overly sold, quite frankly. And I'm not saying it's not necessarily wrong either. It's just oversold because often it comes at the hands of external validation. And you should want to pursue worthy pursuits potentially, but maybe it's overrated. Maybe it's just been oversold the entire time. And yeah, we go and do things, and part of like the American dream is like, for instance, like people work their way up in sports to go and play in the professional leagues. And that's, again, people are paying to go watch these events, and that's probably a normal thing. Like, again, it's not necessarily even wrong, but the whole thing around if you want to deconstruct the whole thing, future planning is built on this. Future planning is built off the self. So if you literally just take away the idea that you matter, you're basically trying to like move away from the fact that you overly matter. In order to save the world. Like if you get enough people to move away from themselves, then you solve the problem of the world, and you start living for the moment and other people, and that's the answer. Anyways, back to the oversold prioritization of the self is attached to future planning and attaining goals. And again, not saying goals are overly wrong, but they kind of are in terms of sustainability of Earth, because if you over prioritize the self, you might inherently think you're the salt of the earth. And if you're the center, if there's enough people out there that think they're the center of the earth, then human life is not, they'll inherently build things and create things and spend money and live luxurious lifestyles. And the more you live luxurious lifestyles, the more damage you're going to do to other people, potentially, and the environment. Again, I don't think there's any need to get into that, but just the oversold pursuit of the self is why humanity struggles as a whole. First of all, and then also, if you live inside of a society that's prioritizing the self, you get it's fine to have a worthy society with goals and want to do things in life, but first of all, fast food shouldn't be a normal thing. Like, we should just have a normal, natural food system. And that's why the three things that matter to get back to sustainable living is like shelter, people that can build houses or at least shelters, agriculture for farming, and things like sports and music and art is obviously good as well. But you just need to Anyways, this is the ultimate goal is momentary living. If you're trying to prioritize liberation and peace and whatnot, you want momentary living because that is there's your answer to your existential crisis. Is that everybody's planning for the future and worried about themselves all the time, and it's ingrained in our society so much so that we're always inward looking and never just living in the external. We're always looking inward, and it will be the reason for all our suffering and the future suffering of Earth. And so I don't know what the monetary system looks like in the future. Obviously, people are coming up with some ideas and lots of stuff coming up, but I think it does rely on mutual aid networks, or I don't know about crypto, maybe. That's obviously not necessarily the right answer. It has to revolve around some sort of sense of community, mutual aid, gift economies instead of um, the monetary system, which I'm not inherently saying it's completely wrong, but it is the source of all suffering, basically. Again, you're going to work, you're paying taxes back into a system, they're allocating the money out to get people to go to work again. It's like a never-ending cycle of like one group of people just trying to get other people to go to work, and which is not prioritizing momentary living. Like, if you lived in a society that was momentary living, you wouldn't be building an education system around necessarily jobs to sustain Earth. Like, if you lived in momentary living, you won't inherently need certain jobs overly in society, like a healthcare system, because if you lived in a natural world with a natural food supply and that wasn't completely corrupted with chemicals and mass production, then you would just a lot of the things you go to school for are going to school for jobs that are you're going to go and do to try and sustain the world or make sense of the world. And it's good to make sense of the world, but maybe making sense of the world and going to school for things that are a lot of the things you go to school for are just for, again, the future, like trying to sustain humanity. And sustainment is what you want. We're getting off topic. This is the future planning is always the root of all suffering. People are like so bent out of shape because they built their whole lives around like wanting a house, and if they can't get a house because the cost of housing is astronomical. Which, yeah, it is, because you live in an inflationary monetary system that does not work, and the money actually you have means like absolutely nothing. But yeah, just there needs to be the sustainment of the earth relies on moving towards momentary living, or at least prioritizing momentary living in your innocence, in your youth, and living when you're young, as opposed to planning for retirement in the future, which is just some sold idea that some group of people made up. And again, you're just conditioned to do things your entire life. So just normalize doing whatever you want to do as long as it's remaining relatively healthy and based on the right things. Then there shouldn't be an issue. It's just that the priorities are completely wrong.